They can't actually picture themselves without pain. They can't see a future self. That they've now just completely pigeonholed themselves to be like, I'm in pain. My future is pain. My future, everything. And it's just like when you can go and just tell them, no, you can be without pain and I can teach you how, then they're just like, what?
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. This is your weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, where my intention, as always, is to help you, the beautiful listener, pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. And as always, here on the show, I have another beautiful mind, another beautiful heart to share with you. But before I get to him, I want to start with a little bit of gratitude to all of you out there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in week to week with this episode. It's growing. I was just speaking to the guest before we started. The show is growing week to week, and I'm grateful. And it's because of you. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for getting value. Remember, if you do get value out of this conversation today, you can leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. You can share this with a friend, and that gets the show out to more hearts, more minds that might need it. My guest today is the powerful Josh Kennedy. Josh Kennedy is the owner of Power Through Motion. He's a manual therapist. He's a massage therapist. He's a biomechanical specialist, all the movement things. And he's a powerful heart. Why you should listen today, what you will get out of this chat is if you're looking on how to connect movement to chronic pain, right? How your body keeps score. What are the energetics behind proper physical movement? Where does love factor into the movement in the body in general? This is what you're going to get out of this episode. So tune in for this value, for this insight. Mr. Josh, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Hey, thanks so much, Harrison, for having me. I'm really enjoying, I really do enjoy every time that we speak together over on Clubhouse or anything else as well. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm love to give as much information as I can towards all of this.
Well, my friend, thank you for accepting my invite. And, we're going to get into some of the things that you specialize in and what you have knowledge around. But as always here on the show, I try and prioritize powerful hearts, and you are a powerful heart. So thank you for leaning into that, and thank you for sharing your time with me today. Josh, how I start these conversations usually is I want to give the audience a bit of background about who you are, right? Nice and short, nice and succinct. And I like getting to the pain, right? Because we all have part of our story that has led us to where we are today. And usually the pivotal part of that story, something has occurred that has allowed us to step into the passions and the purpose that we share with the world. So, Mr. Josh, I'm wondering, within this mechanical movement, physical world that you're so adept within, what led you to this? What was the pain teacher that led you down the road of looking into sort of manual therapy and physical therapy at large?
So basically for me, my whole past, I was into sports, loved sports, and did a whole bunch of that stuff. And I was injured a lot, from like separating my shoulder, tearing my left rotator cuff, to tearing quads, sprained ankles, broken fingers and nose, like herniated discs and all that types of jazz. I've done a lot of injuries, and I don't know how many concussions, minor concussions, from playing lacrosse and football and rugby and all that types of stuff. So, I've injured myself quite a bit. I have a good, healthy list of injuries. But basically, that started kind of getting me into a little bit of a path to go and try and look at how I can go and help people. I always had a big passion for physiotherapy, but I never had the education to go and do that. And I was never had that in grade-wise to go and try and get myself into that. But it led me down a path of becoming like a personal trainer, And then from there, starting to like learn new techniques and new ways of treatment so that I can really understand exactly helping someone through like fascial stretch therapy. And then that led me into like using more manual therapy and hands-on work. And then
Josh, let me jump in. Did you apply this to yourself? Right. So all these injuries that you were moving through, did you start applying all these teachings to your own body?
Not at the beginning. This is when I got injured, I didn't really know too much. So these were when I was in high school and in college and stuff like that, just starting to learn the basics and understanding the body in more detail. But I started getting physiotherapy from other people and from friends of mine. And then it's just kind of, I was like, okay, like I like this. I like healing. I like helping.
Josh, what did that feel like? So I'm wondering, so what I'm trying to get in here, thank you for sharing, by the way. When you were getting that therapy from the friends within this sort of field and you said, oh, this feels good. What did that, tell me what that feels like? Because I know that the reason I'm asking this question is, I know for me, for example, the first moment that I did Reiki, I had Reiki done on me, or the first time I worked with the chakra system, or the first time I did in a child letter, something, it felt more than just good. It was like a recognition of something that maybe had been there for a while. So I'm wondering, when you started receiving these therapies from friends and started healing, was it more like that? Was it more like it was a bit more than just general excitement?
Well, for a lot of this, it just came down to is that like, yes, I wanted to go and help people. But the thing is that like through that whole journey is that like I found out I wanted to help people. I wanted to go and help fix them and help with that growth of getting them out of that pain. But then like I said, I didn't have the grades. So I just took the best option that I could at the time. And that was going to college for becoming a personal trainer and just learning all of that. So that was like, it awakened what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to do this and I want to help people. And then I looked at how to become a physiotherapist and I was like, my education is not at par for that. So,
yeah. And another question that bubbles up, my friend, so it's funny you started as a PT because that's how I started my journey as well. I started as a personal trainer. And I'm wondering what made you go further down the physical route, right? So you get the PT and then you start, I think you said the massage therapist came next and then the more specialized mechanical stuff. Why did you want to get more specialized within the movement area, specifically in the physical area? What made you feel like PT wasn't enough?
So basically, like I found personal training to be a little bit stagnant after a while. I was just kind of going through the motions and it was just like, okay, do this, do that, do this. And I was just like, okay, I need to change things up a little bit. And my clients at the end, they were just like, they're starting to become, it was just becoming mundane and just like those, like, I always try to change things up with everything I do. And like with every session, it's always different. And that's one thing that I was always big on is just changing it up, making it interesting for them. But it just, after a while, it just started getting boring. But like I wanted to see what else I could offer. And I started looking more into like stretching and mobility and understanding that in more detail. And then I got certified in this thing called fascial stretch therapy. And so that opened so many doors for me because then I started going and noticing how flawed, and people might disagree with me on this, but I find that how flawed the pain industry is. That's what kind of drove me into this, that I started going down this path because it was this industry that like people go and get treatment and then they go and feel the same, then they maybe feel a little bit better for a short period of time and then they're back again. And it was, whether that be with massage, chiropractic, physiotherapy. In many scenarios, I looked down these avenues and it was just the same thing over and over and over again for so many people. And so I was like, okay, something needs to change.
Let me pause you here, Josh. So, because I'm happy that we've gotten to this point in the conversation, because this is where I wanted to lead you to. So happy that's bubbled up naturally here. I think if people have been listening to this podcast for a while, this is a theme. This is a theme that sort of circles in through many different avenues, not just the physical one that we're talking about today, but the mental one, the emotional one, there's this theme of symptom-based care out there in the Western world. And I always want to put the disclaimer that if you are a symptom-based practitioner, I'm sure you are a beautiful person that's trying to help as many people as you can, much like Josh and myself. But I think we start to realize that there are many systems at play that we are a part of, that we sort of get led into, that if we aren't consciously aware of, they sort of dictate our choices. And we start to see that thing that you just talked about, of the revolving door of, oh, come fix this thing. I'm good. Let me come back. Let's fix this. Let's fix this thing. I'll see you in a month. Come back, and just not getting to the root of the challenge, which leads me, my friend, into sort of the next question here. And you've sort of set it up. How is movement? Let me maybe correct it. How is proper movement therapy connected to chronic pain, and more specifically, the solution of it, moving through chronic pain, in your opinion?
So this is a very loaded question.
Yeah, we'll break it down. Don't worry.
But basically, movement itself and chronic pain go hand in hand in so many ways. Like, the best way to go and kind of break this down for me, and this is how I kind of break it down for my clients as well, is that we're based up of 3 different types of movement patterns. And our first movement pattern is our primal pattern. And our primal pattern is basically our factory setting. This is the way that our body is designed to move. If you look at anatomy books, then anatomy books are ideal. That's not how our body moves per se for a lot of us. That is ideal situation. But that's how we need to think about it, as like factory setting, primal pattern. But then we end up going and having any outside factors. And this is where you and I correlate very, 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 very closely, because these outside factors can be related to physical trauma, mental trauma, could be related to personal, or even any type of lifestyle choices. So, and when lifestyle choices happen, that could be the type of diet that you eat. If you sit and you're very sedentary, there's too many to count. For any type of outside factors that could be correlating.
Just to jump in here, because I can feel your passion bubbling up, and I want to keep hearing this. But I just want to put this together for people. This is very important, because now what you're saying is there is an internal element that is primal. I love the word, within you, that deserves to be expressed. But now there is an outside element that is forced, that is pushing in on this intrinsic state of being, in this case, in regards to movement, that is impacting the expression of that, primal movement. And if we are unconscious to this, then we can feel like it's normal. We can feel like the external pressures and the stimulus that is created from them within us, how it's expressed. Oh, this is just the way it is. This is just the way, this is just the way I walk. This is the way I'm hunched. This is the way I move. I have no control here. But I'm sure, Josh, you would disagree with this. Keep going.
And you're right. I do completely disagree with everything that you just went. No, not everything that you said, just with that last. So when we have that and all of those outside factors, I call those adaptive patterns, because our body has to adapt to these changes, whatever it may be. But these adaptations are good. And this is where it comes down to, is that we can't go and think adaptations are bad. All of these adaptations are good because our body is trying to adapt to the environment that it's in. But when these adaptations become chronic and stay for long durations, this is when we can start to see injury, pain, stiffness, and many other aspects like that.
And also why, and sorry, Josh, because I'm getting excited with your excitement now, my friends. Which is why the symptom-based treatment is only going to work so far, right? It's only why this chronic system that you just defined, if we keep going back to the chiropractor or the PT or the OT, and we are treating just the surface level symptomology of this chronic challenge, then we'll get short-term release. But the thing is, the lifestyle, the thing on the outside that's making the challenge present, that's not shifting, right? So the short term is achieved, but the long term is not getting a solution. Tell me, my friend. So what do we do about this? So I think what you just defined, I think is very easy for people to understand. So what is the solution here?
So that actually comes down to my last pattern. And the last pattern is our movement pattern. Our movement pattern is the present day patterns, those present day adaptive patterns that we've accumulated over our lifestyle, over the lifespan that we've been alive. So it's now us, whether that be you, Harrison, or myself, or any of the other friends that we have that are practitioners, we need to start identifying those adaptive patterns, those specific ones that you've accumulated. And there's usually, for a lot of them, there is usually a primary pattern that kind of is that original driver. Okay.
Can you give an example? Josh?
Let's just go and say, in movement and mechanical wise, if you have a hip problem and your hips are going and causing, you have limited internal rotation of your hip. Because of you having limited internal rotation, and when I say internal rotation, that means that your entire leg from your hip to your knee to your foot can't rotate inwards towards your midline. And your midline is basically a line that cuts you in half from your belly button. So when we're limited in that internal rotation of our hip, it then can start causing cascading effects through lack of maybe hamstring activation. So like we could go and activate the inside hamstring muscles, because we have 3 hamstring muscles, and we can activate and move those ones, but we can't start using our outside ones. And so as soon as we start having that limitation of movement and contraction and activation of those outside hamstrings, we're then now limited on what our hamstrings can and the power and the speed and the strength that we can actually go and provide. So it's now us identifying that, because on top of it as well, when those muscles are only the ones that are getting used, that's when we can start seeing them being overworked, being irritated, being inflamed, causing pulling and pain at the knee. In many scenarios, this is one thing that I run into on a regular basis. So it's now us to identify that and then improve upon it. But then we also still need to figure out exactly why.
Yeah, what's causing it?
What caused that lack of internal rotation, whether that be the way that you're sitting, whether that be anything else as well. So we can start diving deep into the specifics of why.
I'm interested, Josh. So thank you for that breakdown. I think that you can, listening to you speak, Josh, as I'm sure the listeners out there in the podcast world can relate to this. It really evokes the beautiful complexity of how our physical being is constructed. And if you don't see that complexity, if you don't respect that complexity, I think there's challenges waiting for you to run into. And this is why, and maybe you've heard me speak about this, Josh, I tend to find myself, and this podcast goes out into many different topics, but the reoccurring theme it has is this deep sort of spiritual and energetic foundation that bubbles up into all these different health areas. And this is why I speak about, the spiritual body impacts the physical body, but the physical body impacts the expression of that spiritual being that's inside of us. And if you're not taking the physical body as that beautiful complex system of systems, as you just outlined, then you're going to be limiting yourself in some way, right? You're going to be limiting one way in which that spiritual being expresses itself, in this case through movement, which you're describing. A question surfaced that I want to throw at you, Josh, with what you were just explaining. I'm wondering, you talked about not sitting right as one of the examples that, create the environment in which the muscles are dysfunctional. How often do you have clients that come to see you and they talk about the T word, they talk about the trauma? How often, give me a percentage wise, how many people come to see you and the lifestyle element that impacts their physical movement is trauma based?
That the clients can identify, or that I can identify?
Well, both.
For client wise, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 1%.
Unconscious.
Yeah, they don't understand it at all. And for any type of other type of, whether it be physical trauma, that they're like, oh, I got hit by a car when I was 5, but that was when I was 5. I'm like, well, no, that's a huge thing. That's a big component that I needed to know. but they're...
And sorry to interrupt you, Josh. And it's not just the physical trauma around it either, right? That's probably causing some of the movement, challenges. It's probably, how do you feel about that accident that occurred? Have you expressed, have you released, right?
Mm-hmm. Because on top of that, now, and for me to notice, I'm probably going and noticing, and I'm only getting in whatever the client also goes and gives me. But I notice maybe about 20%. 20% of the time for any type of real mental trauma that could be correlated with that. And one thing that I came to learn is that the pain sensory within the brain and the trauma and sadness and depression aspect are almost intertwined. And people have looked at it at the brain in an MRI and seeing how much it actually is correlated. So when people do have constant trauma, constant pain, and this chronic issue, it's why it's so correlated with depression and sadness and everything else as well, and how much it can start affecting that aspect. So,
well, my friend, that leads me beautifully into a question I wanted to ask you, and I want to get your opinion on this. Have you read the book, or has it come into your awareness, the book "The Body Keeps Score" by Mr. Bessel van der Kolk, my friend?
I bought the book, and I'm listening to it on Audible as well. So
beautiful. So I'm wondering, my friend, what do you think the impact of this is on what you just described? So let me just give some context here for people that haven't heard me speak about this reference before, which is probably a low percentage of listeners, to be honest, because I tout this resource a lot. The Body Keeps Score is a beautiful resource by Mr. Bessel van der Kolk, and he talks about a lot of the studies now showing that when we go through a traumatic event like Josh was describing, and we haven't integrated, we haven't expressed, we haven't healed, we haven't released around it physically, mentally, emotionally, the body will hold on to that experience, or hold on to the sadness, the grief, the shame, the guilt, the anger in the tissues, in the mechanical structure of the body at large. And when we get the opportunity to release, then those emotions can come up. So I'm wondering, one, what is your perspective on this, my friend, in the work that you do? And two, why do you think it's important for people to understand?
Oh, well, for one, it's a huge component. Like just going and giving an example. Like I have one client, for him, he got his meniscus repaired, got surgery on his meniscus, and it ended up being is that every single time, no matter what, even though that he had the strength and the stability to do it, he automatically pushed his knee in towards his midline. And so as soon as he goes and pushes his knee into midline, then he loses all activation of his glutes and stabilization of the lateral aspect of his leg. But we are building the strength and anything else and doing it. But he keeps it in because when he keeps his knee in, that's where there's no pain. When he keeps his knee out where it's supposed to be and allowing it to move freely in that area, that's when he normally had pain. So then automatically, just to go and protect himself, subconsciously, his knee falls inwards, just to go and try and make sure that the pain isn't there. So it's now us to have to show the nervous system and the brain that when he keeps his knee out, there isn't any more pain. And so that means that we have to put it through that load, put it through that type of area.
And what would that look like, Josh? So just because I want to get specific here for people listening, maybe some examples. What would it look like to help that person be in that normal range of motion? What in your what are some tips? What are some practices that you would implement with that person to make that a reality?
So one, I'm a big believer on is just like standing on one leg, but standing on one leg can be extremely challenging. But when we start looking at the mechanics of and the position of the knee, where we want it to kind of stay and land, it's actually our kneecap should be lining up with our third toe. So starting in from our big toe and moving out, and it should be kind of lining up with our third toe in that aspect. And being able to create that support with our pelvis completely aligned, so not one side lower than the other, one side sticking out or falling inwards, keeping a nice level pelvis, and being able to hold yourself with your knee aligned with that third toe and a level pelvis. And you should start to go and feel this one muscle called your gluteus medius. Okay, this muscle should be going and creating that stabilization of the pelvis and of the knee, and so of that full lateral side. So that's how we want to try and go and look at it. And so when I put people into this, I do, and some people can't even do this, this one exercise, and I call it a single leg support. But basically, you just stand on one leg, but then you put your foot onto a small ledge or a step or a bench, whatever, and then you just go and stand there. And then you try to just keep your pelvis level, make sure that the knee is aligned with the third toe, and you just hold for about a minute, 3 minutes, whatever feels comfortable for you. And then from there, we start to build. And that's the thing, is that we have to find that foundational, simplistic movement to reactivate and build upon. Then we can start building strength. Then we can start building more complex movements, multi-joint movements, and speed and strength and power. But we need to start off with that minute foundational piece. And sometimes people don't even get into that full minute level as much as they should.
I think a part of that, Josh, is we feel like we need to do all the things all the time. We feel like, especially, and maybe this is just my personal experience, but with mechanical and structural and physical therapy, I think we feel like we need to get everything correct, and we need to do all of the things, all of the muscles, all of the structure, all of the posture elements, all in a line. And if we're not doing it, we're doing it incorrectly. But this applies to what you're describing and applies to all aspects of healing, in my opinion. The best step we can take is the one that's right in front of us. And that step can be that little minuscule step that sets the foundation for the rest of them to move on. Josh, something else came into my awareness as you were speaking that I want to get your opinion on. How often, when you are setting up that foundation for people and helping people with those small steps and that posture alignment or that step to take, how often do people have releases? Like, do emotions come up? Do feelings come up when they're taking these small steps? So I go back to that example that you just talked about, that man that the alignment of the leg from being, not aligned to aligned. Is there release during that in your experience with people?
Depending on the person. Some people, yes. Whether that be through emotional and traumatic and memories, or through exhaustion. So some people I go and I put through, whether that be putting them through some exercises and getting to reactivate and getting some joints to move that haven't moved in a while, or the tissue that hasn't moved in a while, or whether that be using manual hands-on work to go and try and release the tissue. But definitely at the start, I've had many people within like the first month that they're just like, yeah, I'm exhausted. Like they're just like, I just want to go home and sleep. And that definitely has to go and do with, the effects of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system for sure. But it's also the release of a lot of trauma, physical and emotional trauma to the body. And in that scenario that you were just talking, with the man with the knee, for him, he was having some awareness. He just, it automatically just gave him some awareness of being like, oh, like my knee is falling in because this is where I feel most comfortable. This is where I know that this is where it is. So in the end, it wasn't me that pointed it out. It was him that pointed it out, but we needed to put him into that scenario for him to be aware of it. And so this is where it comes down to, is that he's like, oh, my knee falls in because this is where I feel most comfortable. So now I'm like, okay, great. Now we just, now you're aware of that. And now we can go and start improving upon it. Because the first thing is awareness.
Josh, how often could you conflate, or maybe the better word is replace, comfortable with safety, in your opinion? So you said that man felt comfortable in that incorrect postural alignment. I'm wondering if this is your intuitive sense. Is it comfortable, or is it they feel safe? Especially if we're talking about a traumatic origin. What's your perception of that?
Tell you the truth, I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, and you could go and use those words interchangeably, because they feel comfortable because that's where their adaptation, that adaptive pattern that they've accumulated to be, so that their neurologically sense and their proprioception and body awareness, they're just like, this feels right. But then they can go and say, well, they put the knee there to begin with because of the trauma, because of the pain. And that they're just like, okay, we need to move that knee in. So they kind of go hand in hand within that type of correlation a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you could, I think we sometimes get lost in words. And I would encourage people listening, go with the feeling of it, right? Go with the feeling of it internally and see which aligns for you. It brings up another question, my friend, that I want to flow to now. And thank you for this conversation thus far. I'm really enjoying, and I'm putting some dots together in my head as you're speaking. Another thing that bubbles up for me in my work, and I don't do the specialized biomechanical movement work that you do, but I work with a lot of people. I start with the spiritual, energetic, and emotional side of things. And then once we have that foundation, that's when we move into physical practices like you're talking about. And often what comes up for me within chakra meditation, spiritual activations that I guide people through in, is this idea that we can use our thoughts and our perception of the pain that we are experiencing, and rather than sort of stepping away and ignoring and suppressing that pain, we use our thoughts, we use our mental, cognitive, energetic, capacity to go into the pain. to push ourselves. Well, maybe not push is the incorrect word. Lovingly support ourselves through the pain to see the communication, the answers, the guidance that it might be giving us. So I'm wondering your thoughts on this, my friend, and the power of it, or the maybe it's not valid in what you're doing, and what you understand around how our perception impacts our pain in general. Does that make sense? What resonates out of all what I just said?
Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot. It is a lot. So, like, the perception of pain, it varies from person to person, and that's the thing. Is that like some people can go and say, "Oh, I have a very high pain tolerance," while others have, like, you can go and just like do a little scratch on them, and then they're like screaming out and saying like that was a 10 out of 10 on pain. So it just comes down to is that it's like, okay, these are the aspects, and you now have to go and start correlating how to do treatment around those types of perceptions as well. That it's like, okay, one person I can go and just like go right in and have no real issues, and other ones I have to be like super soft and anything else, which then with when someone is a little bit softer, and that also could be correlated with the types of injuries and the trauma, and which then, like, let's just go and say with like one person that has like fibromyalgia. So with fibromyalgia, it's now like can create so much physical and sensitivity at the lightest amount of touch. And so what we need to try to do is then attack it in a very different way than if someone that just has like stiff muscles or tight muscles. We need to start going at a much lighter approach, and sometimes even hands are too much. And so it's now us having to use, like, I use a tool, like a Graston tool, basically a myofascial tool, and like a metal blade that I go very, very light on, but go over an area to go and just try to release it. And we can go and reduce the sensation to a 0. So then I can then start attacking with my hands and start going in a little bit deeper and releasing the rest of the fascia and the tissue that are really going and causing a lot of the joint pain and stiffness.
And that impacts their perception of the pain itself. I guess what I also want to get your perspective on this, my friend, with what I just asked you before. I'll break it down a little bit further. Thank you for answering that. I guess I want to know, let's say, I'll give an example. Let's say that I have had some kind of childhood trauma and I haven't healed from it. And that childhood trauma is actually impacting my posture or impacting my biomechanics. But at the same time, within that childhood trauma, I'm also stuck in the victim archetype, meaning that this has happened to me, right? I am the victim of this perpetrator, and there is nothing in this that can help me expand. There's nothing in this that can help me heal. There's nothing in this that can help me grow. And I'm seeing that this is something that I can't move beyond. But I'm also seeing these incorrect postural line. I also have a hunched back. I also have hip challenges. The question for you, Josh, is how much do you think that person's thoughts and their reality around them being a victim of their circumstances impacts their ability to change their physiological outcomes? So if that person comes to see you and they're in this archetype, does this impact their ability to heal their postural or movement challenges?
100%. 100%. Because like too many scenarios I've run into that there's one, I'll go and kind of talk about a couple, but there was this one gentleman that I worked on, And for him, we were going and like trying to figure out exactly. He's like, yeah, my feet, my back, everything are really, really tight. And he's like, for the longest time, I always wore like really short, like tiny, like smaller shoes, about a size smaller than I'm actually supposed to. And so I'm like, okay, so we looked at everything, and then I started going and breaking it down. I'm like, okay, so why do you think you were going and think, like, why is like this type of stuff happening? And we started breaking it down, and he's like, because I felt like I was so tall, so then I didn't want to be noticed, so he started hunching more. And then he's like, I didn't want to be that center of attention, so he tried to make himself smaller. And then when he started making himself smaller, he also ended up going and curling his toes into also, which then created a lot of excessive tension through the rest of his, through his legs, through his feet, through his upper back, and everything else. But until I went and started getting him to point it out and start thinking about it, he never even had that correlation. No. And so it's now, he's like, oh, now he's more aware and more understanding of maybe why he's moving the way that he is, why his feet are so tight, why everything is causing so many problems. So we had to break that one down. And we were able to get quite a bit of good mental clarity within one session of treatment, which is absolutely amazing.
Did that awareness, Josh, I want to keep hearing these examples. These are beautiful. Did that awareness empower him? Did that awareness empower him to make a shift?
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, oh, okay. And it opened his eyes, because it's a wall that you didn't even know existed.
And a choice, and an unconscious choice that we're making.
Yeah. And like, I don't know if you've, a little analogy here, but you always go and see these types of like, these TV shows or these movies that there's like these treasure hunters, and they're going through the tomb, and the tomb is ugly, the tomb is old, and anything else. And then they get to this stone wall. And then when they finally get through that stone wall, the stone wall opens, and then it shows this absolutely beautiful land with beautiful trees and water and like luscious ground and everything else. That's the way that I think what happens when people go and see that type of like awareness, that there's this wall that they didn't even know existed. And then once it opens, and it's just like this luscious, like visual, like, oh, wow. And then everything is just endless after that.
So I love that imagery, my friend. And I could hazard to guess, for you, that's probably what makes your job, your career so rewarding, I would guess, right? When you get to see those experiences and those awarenesses that clients have.
Mm-hmm. But they're just like, wow, okay. They never knew it actually existed. And then now, and like, the other thing as well is that they didn't know that there was a future self without pain. And like, we have a good friend of ours, and Pete Cohen, and he always talks about future self. And so with him, like it made me start to be more aware of what my clients' perspective is on what they can't actually picture themselves without pain. They can't see a future self, that they've now just completely just pigeonholed themselves to be like, I'm in pain. My future is pain. My future, everything. And it's just like, when you can go and just tell them, no, you can be without pain, and I can teach you how, then they're just like, what? Like, they can't even fathom it.
I think, so I'm just so happy you're hitting on this point, my friend. And this goes to another question I want to ask you in a second. But I think there are many reasons we could go down with a rabbit hole about why that is the case, of why there are so many people out there that, and I think people are conflating pain with suffering. Pain, in my opinion, is inevitable. Pain is a part of the human experience. We need pain to expand and evolve and grow. But suffering i.e., prolonged pain, that is a choice that we are all making, either consciously or, as you pointed out with that temple door opening analogy, is a choice, right? So I would ask people listening to this episode today, within your physical world, where are you consciously or potentially unconsciously, most likely, making choices to live in chronic physical suffering, right? Where has pain come in to give you a short-term lesson to help you expand, but for whatever reason, you've stayed in that pain and now it's become chronic and become your life and stopped you from stepping into your future self? It's something that people need to become aware of. And leads me, Josh, into a question I want to ask you here. Often within the work that I do, I talk about a lot of the energetics and the emotions and the spiritual foundations of our healing journey. And when I get to the physical lens, I talk about how the body tells the story of our lives. Our body tells, you could look at someone, and you've been talking about this today. You can look at someone and based off their toes, based off their hunchback, based off their postural alignment and how they're showing up in the world, you could start to have a conversation about where these pain teachers have come in, but where we have not listened to them and sustained the suffering. So I'm wondering, Josh, what bubbles up around this? What bubbles up around this idea that our body tells the story of our lives, and how can we sort of lean into it a little bit more to make it empowering rather than disempowering?
Yeah, that, so the best way to go and make it empowering, I find, is to, like, for one, to be aware of it, learn and educate yourself about it. So if you, but like, if you have any type of, like, if you have something that you're dealing with, whether that be mental, whether that be physical, whether that be internal, like, just be like, okay, I'm going to go and learn about it. Whether that be reading some studies, reading some ways of, like, understanding what is going on. And then if you don't understand it, speak to someone about it. Whether that be like yourself, whether that be someone like me, whether that be, again, anyone else that specializes in certain areas. So we need to start understanding exactly what is the true root cause of our problems. Because and, like, the root is everything, and we need to find it. And until we find it, we will still keep on feeling disempowered. But as soon as we can start being like, oh, that makes sense. And you're like, I'm trying, and I've had this many times with these conversations with my clients that they're just like, I have been saying this to my doctors. I've been saying this to my physiotherapists. I'm like, this, I feel like, is something wrong in this area. But they keep telling me no. And then you come along and tell me that it's there, that it's the problem there. And they're like, I've been racking my brain about this for a very long time. And you finally just went and pointed it out, that something, and confirmed what I thought was wrong the entire time. Yeah. And gives them that empowerment that they never knew that they actually had. So I love that answer, my friend. And it actually flows into what I want to ask you next here. And it highlights something that I think people often overlook. It's this understanding that there is something inside of us that is guiding us, right? So in your situation, you were just talking about the person going to all the practitioners and them shutting the doors, but they still felt like there was something there. They felt like there was something to be
that what they were being told was not only wrong, but there was something inside of them that was contradicting, that was still pushing them to find another perspective, pushing them to find another professional like yourself to provide the guidance around the thing that they're feeling. And I want people listening to realize that this isn't just a Josh experience with his clients. This is something that happens for everyone. And we need to start listening to that voice more and more. So I'm wondering, Josh, in your personal life, as the beautiful man that you are, do you have a spiritual practice? And if you have a spiritual practice, how does it impact your relationship with your physical being, either personally or how you show up with your clients to support them?
So the one thing, spiritually, not a ton, but I do have certain correlations that I've started to incorporate through doing my own counseling and therapy and stuff like that. But one thing that I was always, I was a very negative person on the inside, always and to the points of depression and everything else as well. But one thing that I learned was that I had very low self-esteem for myself. And then once I learned that you could go and start building your own self-esteem by just going and speaking aloud what you're feeling. And so
love it.
So by going and just speaking it out loud to yourself, even just to yourself, even though that you're not with anybody else, you can then start to console yourself and get yourself to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. But as soon as you just keep it internally, that's when things can start to snowball, can just circle and just make you feel like crap. So that's one thing that I'm definitely incorporating in my life. Definitely when things are getting tough, when things are really kind of I'm feeling down for myself, I verbally just express it to myself, not even anyone else. And sometimes I do with other people, but
Yeah. And Josh, I just want to emphasize that practice that you have. It's a beautiful leaning into the throat center, the throat chakra, right? And often we do have that limiting belief that you just talked about of feeling like we can only communicate when there is someone to listen to us. We can only share our feelings, share our emotions, share the ongoings of our internal system if there is someone to receive. And that is not the case, right? It could be purely going out into nature, walking in the forest or the beach or wherever you have access to, and just letting it go, right? And that is cleansing. That is a connection to something more. So I love it, my friend. And if you've been listening to this chat this whole time, if you have movement patterns that are restricted, it could be simple starting an act like that and then going to see someone like Josh to start working at, okay, now what can I do from a physiological movement structural lens? Josh, I have one more question I want to ask you before we finish here. But before we get to that, I'm really grateful that you've come on to share your voice with me today. You shared, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this. This is the first podcast you've been on, and I thought you did beautifully, my friend. I thought your voice is powerful. Your message is deep. I want to give you the opportunity now for people that have been listening that maybe have felt pulled to your words, pulled to your method. What do you want to share with people? How can they reach out to you? What do you have going on in the world that people can take advantage of?
Yeah. So for one, I also, as a lot of you know, I am a manual therapist. So I do have a physical location, and I also do actual stuff online as well. So if you're wanting to go and reach out to me, you can go to my website, powerthroughmotion.com, and we can do a consult call, a 30-minute free consult call. This is one thing that I want to definitely go and get all of you guys to know, is that I'm here to help. I'm here to go and offer my service, and it is completely free to all of you to go and speak to me for 30 minutes to go over any type of pain that you're going and having. And then if you do live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, then let's go and try and meet up and look at your pain in more detail. And if you don't, and you live all the way out in Australia, like what Harrison does over here, I'm available to you as well, because I do offer one-on-one online treatment that we can go over all this types of stuff. We do full assessments and everything else as well. And then you can also still reach out to me over on Clubhouse, on the Clubhouse app, social media app, or you can reach out to me over on Instagram as well. So a lot of different avenues where you can get a hold of me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Josh. And for all the listeners tuning in, as always, if you go to the show notes of the player that you're listening on, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you'll see in the show notes all those details that Josh just gave, and you can click on them and go to meet this powerful being. Josh, my final question here for you today. The Cosmic Love Antenna, the intention of this podcast is to help people connect into their deeper sense of spiritual cosmic love so they can express it out into the world. And we've been talking today about how we could do that through a physical, structural, physiological lens. But I'm wondering, what is your definition, my friend, of that LOVE word, that love word?
I feel like it can be eternal. It can be something that no matter how much a person hurts you, you still can love them. And no matter, even after they're gone, you can still love them. Love is not something that has to be physical. Love doesn't have to be something that has to be in front of you or anything else. That's where I find love truly is. And and whether that be if you love somebody, that's how I find is it's eternal. It's something that sometimes you can't even explain. And yeah.
I thought you did a beautiful job of explaining that, Josh, and thank you for diving into that. My friend, thank you for being here today. Thank you for having a chat with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love you very much. Beautiful listeners out there in the Cosmic Love Antenna world, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us on another episodic exploration here into our inner deep diving worlds. I will see you next time here on the Cosmic Love Antenna for your next episode, your next download. But until then, I'm wishing everyone a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you next time here on the show. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, MEAGHER.
Electricast.